down before.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on the Age of Heroes, I'm proud to bring you Astrid in As Above, So Below. Greetings, Astrid. How are you?
Greetings, Hercules. And here we go again. And can you believe mid-March?
The year's been zooming by so quickly.
I just can't believe it. So the first quarter of 2025 is almost nearing completion. And
Yes.
everyone and everything is in transition, including us. We're talking about our health issues prior. And I want to go back to January 1st when we started our Zoom meeting, which unfortunately could not be placed up because I did not have everything done correctly. So it's a learning experience, and I'm in transition as well. So I'm just going to kind of go back a little bit because it is so important
Okay.
in terms of how this year started and how it's a foundation. So we did do the podcast January 1st. Things didn't quite technically go the way I thought they would go. Therefore, we did not place it on YouTube. So I'm just going to touch base with a few things that, like I said, it will set the foundation for this year, all that is and all that is to come. It's never smooth, as we know, with these transitions.
No.
Never. So I live with the forecasts with Llewellyn. They get into the planets, the planetary overview for the week. And I found, since I've used this for a period of quite a few years now, I'd say 4 or 5 years, that I can know what to expect. And it can be my universal guide, what to expect, because it's not just the moon that has its influence on us, but all the planets out there and all the push and pull and tugs that go along in the universe. But the one thing in here, the overview said that one of the slowest moving planets, when one of them changes signs, it marks the beginning of a new era. And of course, the slow moving planets being Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Pluto already moved into Aquarius for good in 2024. And the remaining planets will all shift signs in 2025 before retrograding temporarily back into their previous homes. Here we go again about not having smooth transitions, because they go into a retrograde and then they go forward again and returning to the new signs for good in 2026. So 2025 has given us a little sneak preview of what lays ahead of us. And due to the fact each planet takes a different amount of time to orbit the sun, it's rare for all of these defining planets to shift all at once. Moreover, two of these planets, here's these two slow mo, Saturn and Neptune, will be entering Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. And that's the start of a whole new cycle. And they say we're turning a corner for a new chapter of humanity that will truly be a new age. These planets are also moving from water and earth signs into air and fire signs. So that has a lot to say for it, because we're talking dynamic change. And of course, Mars, with all that it's done and how it was present from January 1st. We're talking the war planet here. That it's going to be a lot of combativeness and chaos before things settle down. So that's really interesting. Matter of fact, it says here that it takes Saturn 29.4 years to orbit the sun. That's like unbelievable. And
Yeah.
with its entry into Aries this year, it's going to be commencing an entirely new journey around the zodiac. It's an end of a 31-year cycle. That's amazing. And the last time Saturn transited Aries was from 67 to 69, which, as you know, was a time of massive social change, the summer of love. And it led the world into an entirely new progressive trajectory. So it's amazing. But Aries is ruled by Mars, the planet of war. So we can also look to see a new cycle begin in that realm as well. It might feel like the post-World War II world was a time of extended peace, but in fact, we lived through the wars in Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War, the Middle East. So they're talking about, and how about this? Because we talked about this in January, Saturn moving into Aries, we can look for a shift in the geopolitical chessboard that will affect the world for many decades to come. That's a little scary. We don't know what's coming, but, we shall see. But they're talking about Saturn was in Aries from 38 to 40, the start of World War II. Then again at the height of the Vietnam War, and finally from 96 to 99, when Osama bin Laden first published his two fatwas and declarations of war against us. And then the focus was on the Middle East for how long?
Yeah.
So we shall see what happens. Neptune's going to be in Aries this year as well, starting a new 165-year cycle. And that planet spends about 13 to 14 years on one sign. So we shall see what happens with that. As Neptune moves into Aries in 2025, it says we can expect this striving for a utopian ideal to recede, and a new normal will incorporate the incredibly valuable advancements of the last decade. It's also a very creative sign. So we shall see if anything happens in terms of new creativities. Outside of art, Neptune also plays an important society role. So the last time Neptune transited this sign coincided with the American Civil War. And that was with the idealistic goal of ending slavery and starting a new cycle of emancipation. It may happen, I thought this was interesting, this astrologer says it may happen that certain states or geographical locations could try to break away from the Union. Or the US could reorganize itself to give states more individual rights. And we see that being talked about now in two different aspects.
All of this is ringing lots of bells, even
Yes, because there are some states that are progressive that want no part of what's going on now. They want no part of it. Of course, Oregon, Vermont, state of Washington, California, they want no part of it. So we may see the US turning its attention to internal issues after more than a century of establishing itself as the world police and cracks in domestic fabric. And we may have to have this country get its own house in order. Interesting, huh?
yes, it is.
That was just the overview. And people could say, well, of course they get little hints here and there. No, no, no. This is drafted way ahead of time because these books have to be made to be sold way before the new year. Again, we talked about the beginning of the year. We talked a little bit about New Year's, and don't have this idea that you're going to set forth your resolutions, because it's not a good time to do it. And please don't get caught up in anyone else's drama. A lot of drama. Again, Mars was a big influence because it was the continued retrograde of Mars and Leo. So they said it started in December 2024 and it was going to go to early March, which we saw a lot of confusion is probably the best word. Should I stay or should I go, as the Clash sang? And he said, not a time to launch new projects, a lot of setbacks and delay. Use this time to plan so you're ready when Mars decides to go forward again. I said, wow, this is just amazing. And they talked about tempers flaring, which is common with Mars. Really interesting. And so now we're looking at January was really tough. We had the first full moon, and they said that was close to Mars retrograde. Close chapters was the big thing. Work on closing things so you can start setting new foundations. And again, resolution with family members. Look at your families and look and see. Make some resolutions with relationships. Maybe some have to end. Don't be so quick to say things that you may regret later. And we talked a little bit about In Bulk, which is February 1st. And we always talk about the Wheel of the Year. I like to think of the Wheel of the Year as it's considered the ancient Celtic calendar. Some refer to it as a pagan calendar, but it always comes back I say, to our ancient ancestors and looking at the way they lived with nature, honoring the natural cycles of life, death, and rebirth, because that's what nature is. And it's the same with us. It doesn't matter whether it's our own physical life, whether it's our health, whether it is our decades in life, the stages of life. And it's the same with nature. All of these different celebrations within the wheel of the year or in the calendar are symbolized by sacred ceremonies, and they represent the changing seasons. Our ancestors lived in agricultural society, dealt with animals and plants. There was no technology. It was basically the stars, and they did a great job. All of our ancestors going way back did a great job charting with the stars. And so there we go. We're talking about our life cycle. And that period from Yule, which is in December, again, the winter solstice, to Inbolk invites us to rest. We talked about going inward, whether it's the crops were all cut, put away, stored in barns. People went inward. They had to now conserve because the light was minimal, darker and colder nights, and prepare for spring within our own self. So Inbolk is that transition time. It's a purification and the beginning of light again. It's honoring the energy deep within Mother Earth. It's not spring yet, because as we say, it takes time. And usually we say, oh, yeah, the seasons, the 4 seasons. And then there are the states that don't even have 4 seasons as we know them here on the East Coast. But it's never an easy transition. And just like as the planets go forward and they retrograde, it's the same with the seasons. And it's the same with us, with our personal growth. Well, we always talk about that pendulum swinging left and right, having a hard time to find center,
Mhm.
to ground, and find that equilibrium. Not an easy thing. So it's not spring yet. Imbolc was the midpoint between the winter solstice and spring. You start getting things ready, though, for anticipation of spring. And then we have Astara, which is coming, that most of us know as the spring or vernal equinox. And it's going to be March 20th this year. That's a period of balance. That moment of the equinox when day and night are equal, symbolizing regrowth, fertility. It is probably one of the most celebrated time because it's awaiting transition and new growth. Of course, all the different holidays and religions and rituals center around this. And symbols of renewal, lambs, eggs. You have the goddess, and I know I'm going to say it wrong, Istra. And it's basically Celtic, that whole period of celebrating agricultural planting in the spring. But it comes from the German word Easter, the goddess, which is, here we go, very simply another word sounding close to Easter. And Easter has those symbols of the lamb and the egg and rebirth, renewal again, rising up again once more. So it's so interesting how when we look at nature, nature lays the groundwork for all of these different periods in our own lives and cycles, whether it be within nature or in life, our internal cycle, growth within us, and how things change with us. And now we're looking at the end of this week, a lunar eclipse.
Yes.
And that's pretty intense. And I don't know if you can feel the energy because, when you have that full moon, you feel it for a few days before. And we used to always celebrate full moon, before and after, and of course during. But an eclipse, the energy is so intense. What's going on out there that they say there's a 3 month cycle afterwards where it has a major influence. on us. So I found that really interesting. And you're like, why does Easter change the date? Someone said to me, why does Easter change? Why is it so late this year? Well, because it's a movable feast and it's calculated on the lunar calendar. So, as much as people want to get away from the universe or the metaphysical or astronomy and just say, well, religion says this or science says this, everything is intertwined. It's all intertwined. But it's the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. So here we go. Easter's determined by the first full moon after that equal period of day and night. Interesting. So it's on we have the full lunar eclipse is on the 14th this year. It's known as the blood moon. It's going to be the only total lunar eclipse in North America this year. The height of it, the totality is going to be 2:26 a.m. to 3:32. So if you want to set your alarm, there you go. A lot of spiritual significance to eclipses, a lot of turbulence too. Cosmic helping hand to, so here maybe you didn't change your resolutions, you didn't make or break anything, but it's time. With Mars going forward, with the retrograde gone for Mars, and this is the time, as they had said, Llewellyn had said, to start setting forth, beginning of March, set forth, clean it out, clean house, and now go forward. Make your resolutions. Bring unresolved emotional issues forward, because it's going to happen, because you're going to feel the energy. And the effects, as I said, will ripple through a 3-month period. Only one we're going to see here if the weather is conducive to seeing it. So we shall see. We shall see what happens here with that. You have any thoughts on all these things going on out there in the universe, all this astronomy and astrological interpretations?
I'm not as knowledgeable about such things as you are, but I am attuned to the planets and to the heavens to some degree, and I've been feeling all of these currents pulling this way and that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could even think of a lot of people close to you. I can, that are experiencing a lot of turbulence and chaos, things going on, upheaval, whether it be passing of relatives, family members, um, relationships ending. I've had a few friends with the relationships got very upended, and crisis is probably the word, crises, and you just have to look at it as, well, this is a transition, and sometimes we need to be knocked off our feet, even though we try to stay grounded, to make some necessary changes in our life. I could remember going back to when I did my student teaching. Of course, with art, you have to do several, you don't just go into one school and teach, you have to do several grade levels because you're being certified K through 12.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember going into this one particular school, and I won't name the district or anything, and I had a lot of apprehension about it. And the student told me right in the beginning, we really don't want you here. It was a high school, no less. And I had to be very innovative with supplies because the budget was really, pathetic.
That's
And
so
you do what you got to do and you work it out. But this one particular student that really did not want me there, and so they had a horrible experience the year prior, ended up being my very, very best student. So sometimes you walk into a chaotic situation and it turns out that it ends up bringing a benefit to you. So, I mean, here was the student that really did not want me there, told me so in those uncertain terms, was an athlete, and ended up spending his free periods coming into the art room, doing extra activities in art. And it was a great experience to bond with these students. So, it's interesting how sometimes chaos can bring about change that can be good. But in the meantime, what you go through, it's like a birthing process, basically. And I think we're seeing that
We are seeing that in the
on all levels in in the world,
lives in the world. Yes.
in our country, with things going on all sides, because like I always say, you got to have a bird's eye view. Um, I was looking at, let me see if I could find it up and bring it up here now, because all the upheaval of all the federal government targets. And, we have a different president, and he has given an extreme amount of power to Elon Musk. And he has this new thing called DOGE, government efficiency, got rid of all experts and everything. And basically, the DOGE are former and current employees of his companies. And they've been appointed to head and seize control parts of the government and to go through and basically wipe it out and start all over again. Wipe it out and just take charge with no knowledge of how these companies are run. And this is when I always go back to what we mention all the time. Private sector and public sector are two completely different animals. The private sector is there strictly for the benefit of making money and a profit for a select few. And that's the goal and the end result. Public sector is there where you are serving the public and your constituency.
Correct.
So you are serving and you have to answer and be accountable, not for the profit factor, but for using what you have, whatever you have, for the benefit of those people that you serve. And there's the word, that you serve. So now we see these are the agencies involved. And I don't think people really heard what the plans were way back when. They heard selectively what they wanted to hear, in the sense that, yeah, we want immigration taken care of. And I agree. Immigration was a mess and the border was a mess. And there had to be some way of resolution to make this work for everybody. And, but not the way it's being done now. And people heard just what they wanted to hear. And they call that the daddy syndrome. Daddy's going to take care of everything. It's like people that believe in what the doctor, particularly our parents, when they grew up, they believed everything the doctor told them
Yes.
because the doctor was the expert. They didn't have the research. They didn't go for a second opinion. And they just wanted to hear that they were going to be better without doing the research or doing the second opinion. And daddy's going to make it better. No, you have to all be an active part of government. And you have to have checks and balances for this very reason. As I said in the past, the union I was really involved with, as I grew up in it and started from the beginning, which was, it was a mess at one point because it became too familiar. The friend with all of her friends and controlling situation, and they forgot they were there for the good of the people. And it took a good 20 years to straighten it out because they assumed that they were belonged there and they had the right to do this rather than to answer to the people. And finally somebody ran, and I'm not even going to go into that, but you have the Agency for International Development, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Department of Agriculture, and we'll go back to some of these later, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Housing and Development, Department of the Interior, Department of the Treasury, Department of Veteran Affairs, Environmental Protection Agency, Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Emergency Management Agency. We know it is FEMA when it have all the disasters. General Services Administration, National Archives and Records, National Endowment for Democracy, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We know that as NOAA, prediction of hurricanes and all these different things that go on. National Nuclear Security Administration, Personnel Management, Social Security Administration. These are all the departments involved. And it wasn't just one, all of them are being targeted. And now you're starting to see some repercussions from states that didn't think it was going to affect them. Wisconsin, there's quite a few other states too, but I'll just bring up Wisconsin as an example where they had some, the House of Representatives were off and they had went back home and they had some town halls. The town halls were disastrous, disastrous because farmers, veterans, people that relied on funding or some management or agencies to go to for situations, for information, found out that they were no longer available. And when they quizzed their representatives, the representatives didn't have any answer. And as some of these people, now their livelihood is impacted, particularly agriculture, because I had some friends of mine posting things online saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? These farms are very impacted. Everyone is going to be impacted in every area. It's just that people did not listen when these things were said, but it was said. If you're going to go through it and cut needless parts of agencies, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with going through and weeding out some of the facts, but you can't dismantle all these agencies with nothing to put in their place. I mean, already we saw there was a mess with the FAA and they had to, I think Elon Musk had to try and get people that were retired to come back and pay them. Here we go, because it's always about money, pay them on a flat fee or a consulting fee rather than have them as an employee. It doesn't work that way because when you outsource, you are not going to get the performance that you need. North Korea, we see what happened when they sent the soldiers to Russia. A good example within the postal office when DeJoy took over and he a business again, got rid of a lot of employees, got rid of machines, changed their hours. No, we're going to have people work not an overtime or whatever. But when you are a salaried employee, you don't get paid overtime. That's why it's best to have a salaried employee and pay them a few benefits because they are loyal to you and they will be there. When you say to someone, I'm going to pay you $10 an hour and this is the work you have to do, it doesn't work. Hence, the mail delivery, forget it. There's real problems. More and more situations on the news where they show that these outsourced employees that were being paid $10 an hour, come on, $10 an hour. We're dumping mail and packages. We're opening them, but a lot of them were getting dumped because they couldn't do the job and they figured, I'm getting paid $10 an hour. I can't get done with this.
Right.
So outsourcing is not a good idea. And you saw outsourcing being done with major corporations wanted more of a profit, sent jobs overseas to these other countries where they paid them nothing, and got the job done or had parts made there and had them shipped here. So they didn't have to pay an American a fair wage to live in this country and survive. So you pay these people a couple dollars a day or whatever, and you bolster their economy. But what are you doing to the American economy? And then you're expecting Americans to buy those products. So now we see these people getting very upset, and Mike Johnson, who is the head of the House of Representatives, say to his Republican reps there, don't hold any more town meetings. Don't hold them. And where is the logic in that? Okay, so they won't have to face their voters and who are asking questions like, am I being affected like this? I've worked 20 years on this farm, or I've done this or that, or I've had this agency. Because they're so controlled. Let's face it, they're told what to grow, how to grow it. There's certain things they cannot grow a lot of, or you have to use specific pesticides. That's an issue too, because they want to control the price.
Right.
They want to control the price. And it's always comes back to money, I know, but there has to be a balance. When they hired a particular person in the town I was in to save money, put him in. He was a business person and he had worked under Christie. Um, he was a business person. He totally destroyed the way the schools were run. Why? Because he shifted people around, saying people get too comfortable. If you have the right administration, people will do their job because they will, tell them they're not doing it right, or they'll call them in for a conference, whatever. You don't just get people to move them around and indiscriminately. And what happened is schools got altered drastically. It didn't work because, again, it's important to save money because taxpayers need to know that you're not wasting it and yet you're making the best of the money. But at the same time, you have to be doing things for the right reason, or it's not going to produce a productive atmosphere of learning. And you're going to do things like, well, I don't have to buy the contract that goes with the system that we have. And guess what? When the system crashed one particular year, well, the person in HR didn't want to spend how many thousands to do it. Now everybody's school had everything crash. And how are you going to access everything now? So you can't be, what do they always say? Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, penny wise, dollar foolish, I've heard.
Dollar foolish. I'm thinking the Brits over here, the pound. But yeah, you've got to think in the long run. And a lot of these agencies are preventive agencies. For instance, there are agencies that go around and was testing all the lakes, making sure that it was safe for people to swim in them. They go around and the agency tests the water to make sure it's safe with E. coli, this, that, the ducks, whatever. And also water rain, the water and the runoff of the rain and how it affected that. And of course, as you know, we've had how many years of algae blooms. They monitor that because algae blooms are not safe, and animals that went in the water, dogs died. And I don't care what they say. You're going to put a little child in a lake with that. Do you want to take a chance with bacterial infection? So you have to, a lot of these different agencies do what they do for prevention. Same with the international agencies. It's a matter of prevention to ward off things before it gets so out of control. So, we'll see what happens. There is a pushback.
I've worked with government agencies my entire career.
So you have more knowledge than I do about how some of them run.
And
I know, like with
I
OSHA and a couple other things, even the products that we had, they were monitored and we were tested and they came.
And as you said, a lot of it is done to protect people from one thing or another thing that is dangerous. And if you start cutting those things out,
Right.
people are not protected, and lots of needless death and lots of needless suffering results.
Right. Most definitely. So it's a matter of, do you want to save all this money? Well, okay, we're not even going to talk about where the money's going to go because you and I both know 2025 is that point when the billionaires tax reform with all their breaks go. And this really is a mad rush to have the funds there to extend the millionaire breaks. That when you're in that certain bracket. And way back when they gave the huge corporations those breaks and said, well, it'll be twofold because they will invest in workers. And that's not what happened. What happened is very few of these corporations, and we're talking huge corporations. I don't know how small businesses even survive anymore.
That was a trickle-down economics.
Yes, but it wasn't trickle down because what happened is they did not hire more people. They did not make it safer for people. They ended up buying back their stock, buying back their stock and giving CEOs bonuses. But when you buy back your stock, now the stock jumps up. So there you go. You're not selling your stock to shareholders. Now they're controlling even more of their stock. So that did not work. That did not work because, again, you're saying you hope it's going to happen. It does not mean it's going to happen because, again, here we go again. Private sector is there to make money. And how they do it is different in terms of how you and I can make funds. So, yeah, that did not work out. It did not work out. So, let's see what happens. But to totally demolish, again, as we say with transitions, you're not going straight to spring. We went to in bulk first because that's that midpoint. And you have to get ready in the ground. And the Mother Earth is getting ready in the ground and getting ready for the seeds. Doesn't mean you put the seeds and the plants in, but you have to follow the natural way. That's how it is. And then, of course, we see, I got to see if I can pull this up. There's going to be a major change June 1st with electricity in New Jersey. And they said that, the prices are going to go way up. And I'm saying, well, and then people are saying, well, why? Why are they going way up? Well, you need to go and look at the research and why. And so I did. I said, I have to find out more about this. I looked at the New Jersey's pending electric rate increase, and fingers are being pointed all different ways. So it goes into effect June 1st. It is triggered by the state's annual electricity auction for basic service. And I'm saying, what? An auction? Well, the board said because of the auction's outcome, electric bills for most of the customers serviced by the 4 large companies will jump on an average by $20. So,
Wow.
of course, now they all start pointing at each other. You know how it is. And we can't meet the demand. We have to buy on the grid. We're at the mercy of selling us electricity. Okay, now let's dig a little deeper into this. And they said affordability is a big concern. Do you know that New Jersey imports most of their electricity?
I did not
And
know.
yeah, and this is like, it's crazy. I mean, some of the things I found out were mind blowing. And of course, they're skyrocketing bills and they got to worry about this and that. But according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, New Jersey consumes 72.7 million megawatt hours electricity, enough to power the state's 3.5 million households twice over. PGM, I guess the PGM is their acronym, interconnection. The region's electric grid manager said there has a decreasing supply and an increasing demand. And we are already an intensive net importer of power. Okay, so we're paying because of our demand. And there's a network grid. And I would always say, where does all this come from? One day the grid's going to crash. All right. And now you're going to have all these electric cars that aren't going to go anywhere. Okay. Here we go. They were preparing for an infusion of supply from the offshore wind energy farms. But remember, there was a problem with the Ørsted's exit from the state because they were going to do it offshore. And then all of a sudden that just fell down. Because there was the big debate, do we want the wind power to make electricity? Well, Ørsted's phenomenal with that. Well, Ørsted got fed up. And then, of course, Donald Trump's administration paused most wind energy initiatives. We're using a lot. We import a lot. I did not even realize it. They said power plants that could have filled the gap have shuttered. The last two coal-fired power plants owned by Atlantic City Electric ceased operating, and PSE&G divested all of its fossil fuel generating stations. So now you have a supply crunch and you have more of a demand with all the electric cars. And I know Murphy wants to make us all electric, phasing out all fossil fuel. Got to find a balance in life. Here we go with that pendulum. It's unfortunate that these wind powered plants, that wind power is not going to be done, and that was just phased out. No, we're not going to fund it. So forget wind energy now. Now here comes the interesting thing. I looked a little further into it, and guess who supplies 93% of our electricity to the United States?
Ooh.
Canada. We import electricity and we export it to them in the winter, but we import a huge amount in the summer because it's hot and you need all the ACs going on, and it doesn't work anyway because of the power grid. They have these planned blackouts all the time, and so this is interesting. You're going to have all these electric cars, and what's going to happen if they can't be powered? And now you're talking about Canada being slapped with all these tariffs. And they have replied, well, then we will just have to do tariffs on you. And this is what happens. Canada and Mexico are the two huge import-export countries with the United States. They are our biggest friends. And I don't know if I can use that word anymore.
Trading partners.
Yeah, because we depend on them for so many things. Canada, basically, it is electricity, and it's also, are you ready for this? Crude oil, which I was totally floored that we depend on them for crude oil, a huge amount. We moved away from Saudi Arabia because that was so volatile, and they're not happy about that. I forgot what the percentage is, but it's below 20% that we rely on them. Yes, we do have some offshore drilling. We also have, as you know, a large amount of fracking in this country, and that's made up a difference. But the fracking, and here we go again, it's a money game. We use some, but we export as well. And we're making big bucks on the exporting of the shale oil, the fracking, because of the Ukraine not being able to supply other countries in the EU. So it's so interrelated.
Connected, yes.
Yeah.
Your excellent research and excellent points.
Well, I'll just keep going, and I'll look at multiple sources. But the crude that we get a huge amount of crude from Canada. So now we're going to slap 25% tariffs on them for this and for that, because we want to find other ways to bring in money for that tax reform. Okay, but now you slit your own throat, because not only are they angry, what made you think they're going to just roll over and say, yeah, sure, we'll do this. It's fine. We'll take these tariffs. Now you have retribution. So you have Canada that's going to hit us. Our electricity is going to even be more. Our gas is going to be more. We fail to realize that our huge corporations send out and have factories all over the place. Mexico with the cars, and other areas, and metal, of course, that's going to be an issue too. And so here we go now. That's coming. Here we go now. So the prices of all of these different products are going to skyrocket up, and you rely on them for this. The EU has taken a stance where they're boycotting some of the American products, saying that, well, we'll just deal with someone else. And Canada says, well, we'll sell some of the crude and to Japan. because Japan has issues getting some of it now, and we'll sell to them. So this is going to be interesting to see. And I understand it's a chess game, wheeling, dealing back and forth. But when you have had uh, a great relationship with these countries, and I also looked into the statement made that, oh, we're getting a Roy deal. It wasn't said as that nice, but oh, we're getting this or that, and you guys are getting all the money, and we're not making money on this. Well, guess what? You were also getting a break because you were trading with these countries. The countries that are getting hit with the tariffs are the ones we trade the most with. So I was very surprised with trades. Mexico was first, Canada was second, then came China, then came the UK, and then it was like the Netherlands, and then now you have countries that were neutral countries that are refusing to deal with us, and they're boycotting, and they're going to find their way of doing things another way.
And that's
The
what
countries, because they feel they can't rely on us.
we're finding other ways.
Finding other ways.
That old systems are falling apart and new systems are
Yeah,
not.
well, it's okay to revamp and to look at things. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, the art of the deal is not the way to go. Public sector is not private sector. And wheeling and dealing, like you're in the private sector, on the world level, the global level, isn't going to work because you have set up relationships with these countries for how long? And now there is such mistrust. And it's sad. It really is. And more than that, when you're dealing on the public sector, there's supposed to be a certain amount of respect and congeniality. You being a public servant for how long you did that, I was a public servant for how long. You have to maintain a certain sense of decorum and professionalism, and to talk to people with respect. If you don't, you're going to get your license yanked as a teacher, and it is easy to get done because it's done very differently. There were reforms, and it can be very easy, and it's just down to it goes back to the golden rule. Would I want someone to talk to my kids that way? When my kid has a bad day, wouldn't I want a teacher to be respectful and to be considerate toward that child, and to realize there's 7 levels of intelligence? And if you can't reach a child one way, you find the way that works. And it's the same with this. Just insulted Ireland, saying they're getting the best of everything and we're getting screwed. You can't talk this way, and then the UK saying things like, oh, what was it? Oh, yeah, you better be glad we're on your side, and you better stay on our side because Russia will wipe the floor with you if we're not there to help you. You don't. This is not what you say, because it's supposed to be a mutual bond of people working together for the betterment of the world. And even if there are times you would like to say certain words, you don't. You don't do that as a public servant. And again, it's not always about the private sector and money. I see what's happening with the Ukraine, and that thing has me the most upset. And when I hear people say, well, we shouldn't be giving them all that money, I say, do your research. Do your research all the way back in history to what happened with the Ukraine. Do your research on treaties. I'm talking the Massandra Accords, 1993 to 1996, set of 4 official agreements signed between the Ukraine and Russia. That preceded the trilateral statement, which promised security assurances. These are written documents.
Yes, they are.
To the Ukraine on the START 1 treaty entered, and it wasn't just the Ukraine. People forget that. It was the Ukraine at one point had the most nuclear armaments in the whole world, the largest amount of nuclear weapons in the whole world, because that's how scared they were of Russia taking over. And it promised security assurances to them, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and with the fact that they would disarm, they would become non-nuclear, a non-nuclear weapon state. And big money was given to Russia as well. And I'm sure to the Ukraine, that's where we come in NATO. And that was called the Budapest Memorandum. This prohibited Russia, the United States, and the UK, the three big powers, from threatening the Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, having economic coercion on them, and using military force. Russia breached it in 2014 by annexing Crimea, which was a part of the Ukraine. And as a result of that, the US, France, and the UK provided assistance and economic sanctions against Russia. So when people question why were there sanctions and he wants to pull the sanctions off, this is why. There was a treaty. And even it took so many years to get that treaty in place. And it wasn't under Zelensky, it was under someone else. It was under a different Russian ruler, yes. But the point of it is, it was never revisited. He just decided that he wants a united Soviet Union again of all these countries that were now free. Meanwhile, they gave up this, they gave up that. And now it's like, okay, we're not gonna honor that anymore. Well, how can you do that? And then when you're on television and you're calling him a dictator because there's no elections, well, during the war, any war, the president that's in place stays there until there's a situation where you can have free elections again and have some kind of how can you have an election in a country that's war torn? And to say that he started the war is just, and obviously, there were many Americans upset over this because you're saying it on television, you're bullying a man, and you're saying not only a mistruth, you're talking about being in NATO and voting with North Korea, Russia, and Hungary, oligarchy governments where there are no democracies, against a country that was invaded and signed treaties with us as well. I mean, come on. How can you just out and out do this? Because there's uranium there that we want. That's why. And as we say, good friend of mine, Stephanie, who was got her master's in economics, NYU, said to me many years ago, it always comes back to money, doesn't it? And corporations and being in control. And power can be a very corrupt thing when you get to the point that you feel it's about you and what's best for you, when there are other people's lives involved. And now you're talking global security, whereas the other nations and NATO itself, other nations have taken a stand to say we're going to stand with the Ukraine, and we don't know why the United States is doing this. How frightening! Did you ever think you'd see this day?
I never thought I'd see this day, and I'm very upset because we were the leaders of the free world, or we were perceived as the leaders of the free world.
We were, but not anymore.
And it seems like as a nation, we abdicate our responsibility.
Yes. And people that will say, well, we don't want to be responsible for everyone. There has to be that pendulum that keeps things in the center. We were always the country that would find that little point, that midpoint, or work towards that midpoint where we could get along. And we were never the country, well, I'm not going to say that because there's some horrible things that this country has done to other countries, but we were not, in theory, supposed to be the country that would escalate situations and resentment, and to say that we're going to annex you or we want you and we will get you because it's a business deal. No, you have no right to access something that belongs to another country, and now, I mean, now there's things going on with big money, Blackwater down in the Panama, buying up some ports and everything. So, we're starting to see things happen that are very scary. And to say to someone, you're going to be the cause of World War III, I don't think so, because I see a lot of causes of World War III going on. I see Gaza being wiped out and people not allowed to come back, and there's money involved there, and there's a horror story there. And I see what's going on in the Ukraine, where we're not going to do this and that unless you play our game. And it's preying on other people. And people may say, well, we're stronger, we can be the strong one, we'll just take over. Why do we have to help the weak ones? You have kids in your family, or like, say, even I have a situation, kids in a classroom or whatever, I'm going to just honor the ones that are there doing really well. I'm not going to do all I can for that child that needs more help or needs a different way of doing things. There's a balance in life, and we have to find it. And just because you're all powerful does not mean you flex your muscles, because you know what happens when you do that. You start flexing your muscles too much, people will be very quiet and plan a revolt against you. And you're seeing things happen now in this country where there's a boycott. There was a boycott called for Amazon for a week. And that meant even, the newspaper, don't forget Bezos owns the Post. That editor, their one particular editor, 20 years there now, just left because wasn't allowed to write an article. Didn't like the article. Bezos said, no, you're not going to do it. You're supposed to be free press. And that's going to the wayside too, because I noticed in order to find certain information, you have to go onto YouTube to see, or BBC, to see certain protests that are going on that aren't on national television here.
Oh, we're not seeing everything.
No. And I remember that happening back in the Vietnam War. And I remember when it happened with Syria, when Syria was getting, oh God, in the beginning, buildings blown up, people living in part of a building, no running water, just a half of a room. And what happened is they stopped showing actual videos of what was going on in these countries. And if you wanted to see it, you had to go to European press to see it. I remember a particular board of ed, there were meetings where things were coming out about some shady deals. Guess what? The mics were killed and it wasn't videotaped anymore. The meetings weren't videotaped. So it's happening, but the communication's not open. And you have to find out about Bernie's town halls in states you would not expect, just to pass on information and say, yeah, well, this particular, you know what this agency does? And I'm sorry, having Q&As with people that are not he's from Vermont, but asking and answering, and they said, well, why is this happening to me? Or why is this agency closed? And he's giving them information. And whatever people may want to say about Bernie, he's a brilliant man and he has facts right at his fingertips in terms of treaties, of each agency, budgets. He's amazing. So I want to be able to find out about these things that are going on. I'm seeing that it takes more and more to find out the truth now, the actual facts, because some of these agencies are being purged. They're being purged of facts. They're erasing the facts. And it's not just books at school, but actual facts of things, scientific studies, this, that. No, we're not gonna have science anymore. And the first time ever, we have our scientists leaving this country and asking for visas to go to Germany I remember there was a time when it was the other way around because of what was happening in Germany, as you know, as Hitler started with um, first you get rid of this group that's a problem, you know, small things, again, like we said, outsourcing and everything. You get rid of this, you get rid of that. Then you move up, and now it's going to be, you know, this particular nationality. Then it's going to be the Jews. Then it's going to be anyone who doesn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. And then he started the Hitler Youth Group, where children were brainwashed and turned against their parents and turned their parents in. That if you thought differently or had a different opinion, you got arrested or you had to flee. Of course, then it's the scientists, the intellectuals, you know, the scientists, the teachers, philosophers, creative people. Arrest them because they're a danger. They think in a different way. And we have to be careful that it doesn't happen here. That just because you have a different opinion, that you are not prosecuted. I mean, this is unbelievable. Or just thrown in jail without even being prosecuted. All of a sudden now, you know, are you going to have a special militia? You're going to go into martial law because people don't agree and they're protesting. Do you have to have a Tesla in front of the White House to promote it because somebody's stocks, people are upset and they sold their stocks because they don't want to be associated with him? Because now there are people that are starting to boycott products, and it's very easy to find out who makes these products that are pushing Project 2025, and they're, you know, big money towards those products. There's a list. You can actually see the whole list of vendors. And I was very upset with some of these corporations. Hey, they have a right to promote any candidate they want, but not when they start
Not to buy
promoting.
companies. And that's what's happening more and more. People, as you said, are boycotting some of the companies over the diversity.
Yeah. And of course, when it involves money, here we go. Then they're upset. There were certain things where they would talk about how their affiliations with that. You can hide money now with donations to, you know, to politics. And I always said, no way should politics be funded by corporations. No way should there be dark money like Citizens United. When you look into Citizens United, and there's all this dark money that goes into it, and people not having to declare, you know, where they're doing, well, now you've bought candidates, and how are they going to pay you back? You should have to do it like they do in Scandinavian countries or whatever. Give them free airtime, it's equal. And then there's a code of ethics and honor. You don't start slandering people and saying vicious things because all you want to do is win. And then you're turning it into a Jerry Springer show. You know, you're not doing facts, you're getting raw emotion and getting people involved that way. Where then when you do that, you stop thinking logically because you're
And
dealing with emotion.
unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Oh,
Astrid,
worked out well.
yes, you research things, and I believe that that's something that everybody has to do. There's so many different perspectives out there.
Right,
Uh,
right. And you have to look at every single one. And that's what I try
correct.
to do.
This
And
week,
more than that, it's while we can still find facts, and that's the scary part. While we can still find facts, we need to do that.
we need to exercise whatever freedoms we have at any point in time. And again, to have our voice be powerful and let it be known by boycotting, by speaking that there are certain things that we don't want in our reality.
Exactly. That we don't want to become reality that happened once before, and it can happen again. And that's when you say to yourself, like we've always said, how could that have happened? Well, you might be seeing it happen again, but I'm glad to see there are people are saying, well, if we can't, just as Europe is saying, we can, and Canada, we can't rely on the United States anymore because look at this, which just happened. We have to rely on one another. It's the same with people. We can't rely on Congress because look, they're afraid to say anything, except for a few people saying what they're saying, and Bernie going around giving the facts. Um, that many are afraid, and so it's up to us to do it however we can. And if there are people to say that, oh, don't boycott Tesla, that's people's right. Here we go, because you have that right, freedom of speech, I hope, to say certain things. Although you're starting to see that. Depends on again, subjectivity. We always say this: subjectivity versus objectivity. Is it only good for one person and not the other? Is it only the way I see it? Well, maybe we need to have the bird's eye view and not just see it from the point of our own view, but keep widening that circle. How is it affecting the farmers? How is it affecting people that now can't, that are working and can't afford to do this or that or pay for their medical insurance? And so and now even more so, how is it affecting us on the global scale? How are some of these decisions going to affect us with the tariffs, with our knowing what we know about the electrical grid? So maybe we need to make some changes there. And knowing what we know about crude oil and how we access it from Canada. So we've got to see things further, and how we talk to one another, just how we wouldn't want to be spoken to. Then we should have a little bit in regard for other people as well and their beliefs.
Thank you so very much. And how can people contact you, Astrid?
Through you.
Okay,
Through you. And next time I'm going to work on getting the picture.
that'd be awesome. And
Here we go. Transition. Next time we talk, it will be really spring.
we
So, we make our changes. We move along. We move it along.
will progress a step at a time.
You got it.
I have to get a new camera. Also, my camera is cutting off half my head. Or
We'll work on that too. We'll work on all of it.
Yeah.
We're work in progress always. We never stop learning. We never stop finding new ways to do things.
which I believe is as it should be.
Yep.
Thanks. Listened also. May you make wise choices in the days ahead, and may the changes and transitions and retrogrades benefit you, if not immediately, in the long run.
There we go.
Have a nice evening.
You too as well.